Hello everyone! Today for Artists for Everyone, I thought I would show you how to paint a two-color pondscape. So not necessarily a landscape, but a little tiny view of the pond that I love that I walk to next door. And I'm going to introduce a new tool. We're going to need a little ruler or some kind of straight edge. And we're also going to use drawing gum. This is PBO drawing gum. It's my favorite brand. And what it is masking fluid. And what masking fluid does, it's also called liquid frisket, and it reserves the white of the paper. And you can apply it with a brush or with a toothpick. I tend to use a metal nib pen to do it. So any of those things would work fine, even a ruling pen. Toothpicks work great as well. And so I'm going to start with that and just show you how I would do it. So with the pen, I dip the pen into the masking fluid so I have a nice little reservoir in it in the nib. And for this, I'm going to position my ruler on the paper, try to make it straight. And I'm just going to draw with the tip of my pen across the ruler, and I just skip every now and then. Sometimes it's thicker, sometimes it's thinner, but that's it. So it's just this little row or line of masking fluid, and we need to let this dry. And once it dries, it will it will be sort of a placeholder for the white of the paper, and you'll see how that applies to our painting in a little while. So I'm also going to tell you about the other tools. When you use masking fluid, you want to rinse your tool right away. With a metal nib, you can also let it dry and then peel it off, but I'm going to rinse it as soon as I turn the camera off. I just wanted to let you know that, especially if you use a brush, because it will ruin your brush if you do not use it right away. I never, ever, ever use a good brush. There's also things, they're masking tools you can use. I bought this to try, and to be honest with you, I did not like it. So I stick with my metal nib or even a toothpick. So we're also going to be using, I have a piece of 9x12 cold press watercolor paper, and I have my pointed round squirrel mop, and I'm also going to use my badger brush maybe. So I have those two brushes, and then I have my Artists for Everyone palette, but we're only going to be using two colors, and that's Cyan Brûlée and Cobalt Blue Primaire. Okay, so a burnt sienna and a cobalt blue or a French ultramarine blue are the only two paints you will need for this project. So I'm going to turn the camera off, let this dry, and show you a little surprise, and then I will be back to finish the rest of the painting with you. So I thought I would try something different and take you on a little tour of the farm next door where I walk every day, because it is the place that inspires my work more than anything else. So I hope you enjoy it. So I want to show you something. This is my backyard, and last year we lost a big tree, so Rick started making this path into our woods. I love it. So this is a really special place to me. Through the woods you can see the farm next door. It's 633 acres, and I walk there every day. And this is our woods, and then there's a creek down below that separates us. And several years ago when I was really sick, Rick surprised me and built me a picnic table out here in the woods. And every morning when the weather is nice, we have our coffee out here in the morning. And I sit out here and do work sometimes. I get Wi-Fi out here amazingly. Oh, my Mary got knocked over. Oh, I'll fix you another day. Okay, so there's our little creek. We lost a tree here last year. It fell across the creek. But this is my table. And it's just a remarkable place to sit. And we see all sorts of things, from coyotes to foxes, deer, and all sorts of birds. The deer come and drink in the stream. There's water lilies down there, water irises, sorry. It's just this beautiful place, and in the summertime, it gets this gorgeous canopy. This is a beech tree here. And we have this big canopy of leaves over us. And this is our table where we sit and we have our coffee in the morning. Pretty lovely, huh? Very special place. Okay, so it's time to get painting. And here's the thing about using two colors. And often when I choose two colors to use in a landscape or any painting where I'm only using two colors, I tend to choose colors that are opposite from one another on the color wheel. And the reason is that I can get these beautiful clear true colors when I use them alone, but as I mix them slowly together, they create neutrals. So I get this huge array of color by only using two colors. So blue and orange, which is basically burnt sienna or crème brûlée, is basically an orange earth tone, and then blue, those are opposite one another on the color wheel, so they're complementary colors. All right, and when I start, I want to make sure that I use both colors by themselves in the painting somewhere. So I'm going to start with the Cobalt Blue Primaire, and I'm going to make a little puddle of it on my palette. And I want to use it straight like this. I'm going to add plenty of water to it because I don't want it to be too dark. Okay. Nice puddle of that. And I'm also going to make a puddle of Cobalt Blue Primaire. With some burnt sienna or crème brûlée added to it to gray it out a little bit. A little bit more blue. If you add too much, you're going to get brown or gray. So I want to make sure it's mostly blue. So I've got kind of this blue-gray. And put plenty of water in that. Okay, so that's my beginning. Now I'm going to start. So this line that I drew with the masking fluid is actually going to be my horizon line. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting some water over that horizon line. Because any color I put down, I want it to sort of soften as it comes to that. And I'm going to start at the top of my Pondscape with some straight Cobalt Blue Primaire and sort of bring it down. And then I'm going to pick up some of my other mix that I made and start introducing it. And I want to take it all the way to that horizon line. And then I want to start bringing it down. And then I'll finish with some of the Cobalt Blue Primaire straight at the bottom. Now my edges aren't even. I can crop those later if I want to, and I can cut the paper or whatever. I'm not too worried about that. So then I'm going to take just water on my brush and I'm going to push it around in the sky a little bit. And that just sort of gives me the suggestion of clouds perhaps. Just pushing it around. Okay? Not too picky or fancy with it. I want it to just do what it's going to do naturally. So here I have Cobalt Blue Primaire, a mix of Cobalt Blue Primaire and the crème brûlée, and then I've carried it down here and finished with the Cobalt Blue Primaire. All right? So immediately, I want to make a darker mix of the two. So I'm going to use plenty of Cobalt Blue and plenty of burnt sienna or crème brûlée, so I get a grayish black brown. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to use my smaller brush now. And I'm going to pick that color up while the sky is still wet with my squirrel mop. And I'm going to drag it across the horizon line. Now, you noticed how the paint sort of spread, okay? I really want that. I want it to happen. So once that's done, I'm going to take it again and I'm going to pull it across to make it a little darker, all right? And then I'm going to look and see what I have. So because this is water down here and sky up here, we want a reflection of what's above the horizon line to apply below the horizon line. And so I'm going to take more of my gray-brown mix and I'm going to kind of drop it in where I see that it didn't kind of repeat itself. You see what I'm doing? I'm sort of mimicking below what's on top. It doesn't have to be perfect because reflections rarely are. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit more right to the horizon line above the horizon line, so right above it. So do you see how I sort of have a reflection of what's up here is now down here? Okay, I'm really happy with that. Now, to add a little bit of variation to my trees, my tree line, I'm going to take a little bit of the Crème Brûlée, water it down a bit, and I'm just going to touch it here and there. Just a little bit here and there, and even maybe a tiny bit in the reflection. Not too much. Just to give it some variation. Now I'm really, really happy with this. I am not going to do anything else to it. That's how simple this is, okay? Over here I noticed that my paint sort of ended, so I can add a little bit more just to sort of flesh that out over here. Beautiful. Now remember that watercolor dries lighter. Okay, so it might look really dark right now, but it's going to dry lighter. And that's okay. This doesn't need to be a really dramatic scene. I kind of like that it's subtle, but I can, while it's wet, I can still go in and drop in more paint in a few areas if I choose to. So right now, it's at a kind of a delicate stage, and I don't want to add too much too many brush strokes right now while it's still so wet. However, I see that my clouds are pretty strong right here, and that would be reflected in the water. So I might take a wet brush and just sort of swipe it through where I see the clouds above, just to give me a little bit of variation down here in the water, in the reflection. There. Now this is called a waiting game. So what we want to do is we want to be able to put some water lines, sort of ripples in the water to make it look like water. And for that there are two ways to do that. I can do it as it starts to dry with the tip of a wet brush, and I can just sort of pull the tip back and forth in a kind of back and forth movement. I can do that, and that does give a nice effect, and I would recommend trying it. This is practice anyway, so we can take the tip of our brush and just sort of very gently move it back and forth. One thing to remember is that the ripples in the distance will be thinner than the ripples closer to us. Okay, so we want to keep that in mind when we're pulling the tip of our brush through. Down here I can use bigger strokes. Okay, so over here I'm just pulling it through a little more. And I think I'm happy with this. I'm going to let this dry, and then when we come back We're going to remove the masking fluid, and then we're going to add a few more details. Okay? So let your painting dry at this point, and I will be back after my walk. So hello, you never see me. But anyways, this is my farm next door. It's 633 acres, and I will give you little tours of it here and there. So this is my farm. It's not my farm, but it feels like my farm. I walk here a lot. Over here is one pond, and there are a lot of fields and woods, and I'm going to walk up to the pond and show you one of my favorite places to sit. All right, my cat just knocked over all my boxes. Since Ralphie. Okay, so my painting is now dry, and that means I can move ahead. And the first thing that I want to do is remove the masking fluid. Now here's a warning. If you try to remove the masking fluid before the painting is dry, you'll make a big mess. So really, really give it time to dry. And I'm just going to start with a clean finger and just sort of move it over. And if you find that it's tricky to get off, and sometimes it's trickier than others, you can use a kneaded eraser. And I think I'm going to do that, or just an eraser in general. Let me see here. Where is my eraser? Well, sorry guys. Thought it would be easier. Okay. So I'm just going to use a kneaded eraser really gently across. The problem is I seem to be lifting paint at the same time. And I don't like that, but we're going to have a misty day. Okay, that's pretty good. So depending, you know, I don't know, sometimes it's different papers. I have to say I've never used this paper with this technique, so I'm not sure if that's what it is. But I think I'll leave it at that. So it did remove most of it. I normally don't have any trouble with this, so I'm not sure if it's the mixture of the paper and these paints or what, but it was a little tricky to get off, trickier than I normally experience. But you do want to remove it gently always. So that is the best I can tell you. It's good enough. It's definitely good enough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my glass of water that I left over here. Talk about unorganized. And because the paint dried lighter, I can add a little bit more here and there if I need to. And so I can take some of the gray-brown mix on my squirrel mop, and every now and then, especially above, I can put in a few little details with the tip of my brush, and I'm just sort of, you know, I actually kind of like where some of the paint came off because it looks misty. So I can just enhance that line a little bit with a few more flicks of that gray-brown mix where I see it might be needed. See what I'm doing? Just really lightly. Flicking in some of that gray-brown mix. I watered it down just a touch. I'm using the tip of my brush to add in little feathery strokes of that watered down gray-brown. Just a little bit. Okay. I am not going to do that in my reflection because the reflection is usually lighter. But what I am going to do is I'm going to introduce some of the Cien Brûlée in its pure form. So I'm going to grab some of that on my squirrel mop, put it on my palette, and just make sure my brush is really loaded with it. And I'm going to dry my brush off just a tiny bit, and I'm going to turn my paper. And where I have that horizon line, I'm going to use the tip of my brush to introduce the Cien Brûlée. So do you see how I'm just dragging it across the tip of my brush? And I get some of that beautiful rusty red. And what that reminds me of is at the pond in the winter, there's usually a line of reed grasses, and sometimes there's sort of this bronzy color, and it reminds me of that. And it also just gives an interesting element to the work. I'm going to do a little bit more on this end. And then pick it up here, bring it across. Okay. Anywhere that I've missed, I can go back in, fill it in. All right, I'm really happy with that. So the final finishing touch for this painting is to lift out a little bit more where we see some highlights in the water. And for this, I'm using a different brush. Now, you could try to use your squirrel mop, and the problem with it is that these squirrel mops are very soft. The bristles bend very easily, which is super important for when we paint with them. But for this technique, it's great to have a stiffer brush. You could use a stiffer synthetic brush that's very small, like say a 0 stiff synthetic. But I'm going to use something called a blender brush. And this is made by Princeton. It's called Willow's Blender. It's a 1/4 inch. And it's just this really stiff synthetic bristle brush. And I'm going to use a clean piece of paper towel in one hand. And I'm going to wet my brush, dry it off, wet it again, dry it off so it's wet but not dripping wet. And then I turn my paper so I can work better. And I'm going to take a look here every now and then where I see lighter areas, and I'm just going to very lightly scrub my brush back and forth and then dab it with my paper towel. Wet my brush, drag it across every now and then where there might be highlights on the water. The key to this is to be random and to sort of pick up where you lifted before. You don't want to have one line going all the way across. You don't want any line to be too long. Some of them are quite short. So I'm just lifting and then dabbing with the paper towel. There you go. See how that's creating highlights in the water? Remember, they're thinner toward the top, and as I come down here, they're a little thicker. It helps too to study patterns on water and how the sunlight hits the water and where it sparkles and where it doesn't. I'm going to do a little bit more down here. Nice, thick, juicy one. Let me see here. Anywhere else? Maybe a little bit right here. And I think I'm really happy with that. I'm not going to do any more. So that is our Pondscape with 2 colors. Only 2 colors were used to make this painting. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to try it with the Cobalt Blue Premier and the Cyan Brûlée first. Okay? Give it a try with that first. Then try other complementary color combinations. Look at your color wheel and pick 2 colors on the opposite. You could use Wood Violet and Ochre Leger and make sort of a grayish tone from mixing the 2 colors for the sky, bringing it down into the water, and using a darker mix of the 2 for the trees with maybe a little bit more Wood Violet mixed in there. And the Wood Violet will really spread beautifully. And then you can make this line where you erase your masking fluid with the Ochre Leger, and it'll be beautiful. You could also do it with Water Rose and Cobalt Blue Premier. You could do it with, I'm trying to think what other combinations I have, with the Viridian and the Cyan Brûlée would be beautiful together. So try all different combinations in your paints. Even Mimosa and Wood Violet would be really interesting. And I hope that you'll share these with me on social media. I love, love, love seeing when you make paintings and share them. It brings me so much joy, you have no idea. So I hope you enjoyed this. It's a really simple project, but it can be very beautiful too. All right, have a great day, and I will see you again soon. Take care. So I haven't been here in a few days, and it looks like a tree fell. It's so sad. So this is the path between the ponds. Over here, this is called Moss Pond. And then this over here is Willow Pond. And Willow Pond is where I sit the most. I have a sitting spot in there. And there's this lovely stone that I sit on. I don't know if you can see it. So as I went to try to go to the pond and take pictures for you and video, my camera died, so I had to come home, but I thought I would leave you with this picture of the woods at the farm in winter. We had a big snowfall again, and it's still snowing right now. It's just crazy. So I hope you'll let me know if you enjoyed these little inserts of videos of my big place of inspiration. Let me know if you like it or if you don't, and I'll either add more of them to future videos or I won't, depending on what you tell me. All right, thanks so much. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for being here.